nyt siirrymme päivän pääpuhujaan. I'm sorry, you have been following the start of our program in Finnish fluently, because we have Mark Deuze here from University of Amsterdam, professor of media studies, right? Mark Deuze on tämän hetken kansainvälisessä media- ja journalismin tutkimuksessa hyvin keskeinen nimi. Näin nimittäin kesällä itse isossa viestinnän tutkimuksen konferenssissa esityksen, jossa oli kartoitettu sitä, että kehen muut journalismin tutkijat viittaa keskeisissä tiedejournaaleissa, kun ne kirjoittaa. Eli kenen töitä ne lukee ja kehen he viittaa. Ja tämän koko kuvion häkkyrän keskellä oli Mark. So, sorry now you didn't get my flattering introduction, but this is the mixture of languages we live with. I was just saying that you are the central figure, also examined through referencing in journalism and media studies, and we are so happy to have you here as a speaker. So you can start getting ready for the stage while I still speak. So the reason why Mark is such a central name is, I think, the reason that he's always the one to spot themes that have to be studied before others even realize that they have to be studied. So he's in the front line, I would say, and then digging deeper into those phenomena. And then publishing like, I don't know, how do you do it? He has authored so many books and so many articles that also is richness for us others to read your work. The topics among Mark has studied media work, media participation, entrepreneurial journalism, media management, journalism's professional ideology. And today, Mark will talk about the latest research, journalism, but also other media professions as creative work, right? So, and as we know, creative work also requires and involves passion and commitment. You know, if we want to be creative, we sometimes have that passion to do it and the commitment, but such passion can also wear you out. And this is the theme. I think these are the themes that will be addressed in this keynote speech with the title Envisioning a Human Future for Creative Career. Please, Mark Deuze.
I'm not quite sure what Laura told you about me in Finnish before she made all these really kind remarks in English, but it's all lies. Actually, I mean, of course, I'm incredibly privileged and honored to be here as part of your celebration, and also my partner and I, just want to thank Laura and everybody for the kind reception and just lovely meeting yesterday with the colleagues and the students. It's absolutely wonderful. And I've been here before, late 90s, early 2000s. I had the privilege of being a guest here as well. And I'm pretty sure the reason why I'm back here now was because in 2007, I was here to talk about yet another book. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think I should stop now. That's true. I've written too many books. It's just so much fun. So I came here on a book tour. I was traveling around the world, and I was very fortunate to be here as well. And I came into one of these kind of big auditoriums. It was in the other building, and it was packed. Like people sitting on the floor, and it was like, I thought, wow, I'm popular. Like I'm a kind of a big deal, right? And so I thought everybody wants to know about my book, and I prepared 99 slides, and I was really excited. But then it turned out that, I don't know if you remember this, but just a year before, a couple of months before I was here, the first iPhone was released in the United States, 2006. And it hadn't arrived in Europe yet. But I, at the time, was a professor in the United States, and I had one on me, and somehow that word got out. So instead of my 99 slides, I spent an hour and a half on a sort of overhead projector showing my new iPhone. I think that's where it all comes from. So let's get to work. I want to talk about today about a human future for a creative career, and that includes a career for journalists. For the last 6 years, I've been doing research in my own country, the Netherlands, in several other countries, South Africa, Australia, the United States, and some other countries, talking with people at unions, at professional organizations, in newsrooms, in studios, not just in journalism, but also in the other key media professions. Advertising, marketing and PR, film and television, digital games, music and recording, and social media. And something in all those conversations was strikingly and to some extent shockingly similar, which is a sense of crisis. This is not a term that I use, but it is a term in almost every single, not academic, but professional publication about what's it like to be a working journalist, working advertising creative, working film producer or actor or crew member, working musician or music worker, working vlogger or influencer is like, feels like. And at the heart of these stories of crisis is a paradox, and that's the central argument and theme of my work and my book and my teaching and what I want to talk about today. And the central paradox is that what these people are doing, what many of you are or have been doing in your career, working as a journalist, is on the one hand the epitome of a dream come true. Right? It's the thing that feels like a genuine purpose. It's a privilege to turn your creativity into a career. It is work that makes sense, that adds value, that delivers a service, that is, well, let's just be honest, fun. A passion project, a labor of love. These terms are common among people who pursue creative careers, who get to do this kind of work. And at the same time, because of the same reasons, the work has a dark side, and not just sometimes or now and then, but structurally, that the same aspects of the work that draw you in, that turn it into a project of passion, are also the things that burn you out. And somehow it seems that the industry that has emerged around creative work is built around this paradox, that it needs the paradox, that it feeds off this paradox in order to do what it does. So there is a paradox at the heart of what working in the media is like. And my argument today is that to understand and appreciate what a human career in this field is, especially in the context of AI and generative AI and all the other challenges that we're facing, is to really understand this paradox and act on it. And the argument today is also that acting on it isn't really all that difficult, but it does require us to have some difficult conversations with ourselves and with each other. There is a sense of a global crisis. And you can see that if you just do a quick search on the headlines of trade magazines around the world about anything related to mental health and well-being and one of these media careers that I just talked about. I mean, on the top left, you see stories about the film industry, and not just in the United States. On the bottom right, you see stories about professional musicians or being a DJ. In the center of my slide, you see headlines around journalists being passionate about the work, but also feeling that they can't make it work. I mean, these kind of surveys generally show that, you know, anywhere between 70 to 90% of workers, such as journalists, say, oh, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. I'm passionate about the work. I would do it again in a heartbeat. And the same percentage say, I struggle because of the work. Like I'm stressed, I feel burnt out, I'm anxious all the time, I'm scared about the future, I come to work with my butt clenched because it's scary, I'm fearful about what's coming next, whether I will be the next one being let go, being fired, being made redundant. So it's the same percentage of people that are happy are also indicating that the reason why they're happy is also the reason why they feel sick. You see the industry responding to this. And this started about 10 years ago. So I mean, you're celebrating 100 years of journalism education. But there's also a well-detailed record of people feeling like this while pursuing creative work, while being a journalist or a filmmaker for well over 100 years. I mean, there's archival records and biographies of working journalists from the 19th century that talk about this weird paradox. It's like, I love being a journalist, but I'm also drunk almost every night in order to cope with the pressures on the job or in the newsroom. There's amazing anthropological work of anthropologists visiting film sets in the 1950s and 60s, for example, in the United States and Hollywood, and looking around and saying, like, what are these people doing? They're all acting weird. None of them seem to be like normal, reasonable human beings. They all seem to be sort of on tension, completely on guard, on edge, burning themselves out, and at the same time pretending that everything is awesome and great all the time. And so this is not new. I mean, the 100-year history of journalism and journalism education is very much also a 100-year history of struggles with health and well-being. The difference is that in the last 10 years, the industry itself, again, not so much academics, with very few exceptions, but the industry is taking note and documenting this. So the images that you see are just little screenshots from reports that industry groups around the world have started to collect about how their people are doing, and the answer inevitably is not so well. Well, not so well and great at the same time. There is now an emerging literature on this, a lot of it also contributed to by the scholars here at Tampereen University, of course. One of the many reasons I always love coming here. I mean, I meet so many friends and peers who are doing an amazing work here. Got many old friends here, such as Carla, such as Ari Heinonen, such as Heikki Heikkilä, such as Laura, of course. Absolute an example, a benchmark for the work that I do. But the problem with all of this work, and I don't know, you don't know me, you don't have to know me, but some of these books are written by me. I didn't talk about mental health and well-being either. I've been doing this for close to 30 years. I just never really connected the dots until in the last 5 to 10 years, something changed. So now there's an emerging field, only in the last 2-3 years or so, also of publications talking about emotions, health, and well-being in journalism. And I just want to acknowledge that the book that I talk about today, that came out just a couple of weeks ago, is the last in a line of 4 or 5 books that have all appeared in the last couple of years. So there is an emerging sense of there's something going on and it requires our attention. So what does the research say? I mean, what exactly is going on? Well, there's roughly 5 stories to tell here. The first story is one of exceedingly high rates of stress, depression, exhaustion, fear, and burnout. And these rates are on average between 4 to 6 times higher among media professionals than in the general population in any of the countries that I've been able to collect the data and do the research. So on average, about 3/4 of journalists in any given country, including the research that I'm familiar with here in Finland, among Finnish journalists, say that part of what they're doing, part of the conditions of the work, causes them levels of stress, depression, and burnout that are structurally problematic. So I'm not talking about having a bad day or a bad week, but I'm not sure if I can still be able to continue to do this work. I mean, in fact, for the industry, one of the biggest problems in journalism in Europe, this is a European-wide project that I'm now referencing, so the number one problem is the turnover problem, which means is that on average, journalists that enter the field leave between 1 to 3 years. And this is not unique to journalism. In the film industry, in Germany, in Denmark, in the Netherlands, in the US, in Australia, data shows that people in the film industry, 80% of those people never ever contribute to more than one film in their lifetime. So you work on one film as a crew member or somewhere, and then you just burn out. You just leave. 80%, right? 1 to 3 years, the average length of a journalism career. Something is structurally problematic if that is what happens to our young people that we want to enter this amazing profession. The second story the data talks about is when people are asked, these professionals, these filmmakers, these creatives, these journalists, so what is the problem insofar you are concerned? And most people cite a combination of extreme workloads, poor working conditions, that includes precarious employment, poor pay or lack of fair pay, a lot of uncertainty. Even those who have contracts feel, well, everybody has had the experience of coming to work in a newsroom and people have disappeared, colleagues, friends. And is that because they were bad journalists? Didn't they meet their deadlines? Didn't they do proper fact-checking? Hell no. It's random, and that's even more destructive to morale and to health. Right? If people are being let go or contracts not renewed because they're bad journalists, yeah, that makes sense in a way. But if it's random because some kind of funding disappeared or the audience numbers have dwindled or there's fewer advertisers, and so, well, we'll cut 10% of the newsroom. Well, that destroys people who are there because they love what they do. They show up first, they leave last, and still they are being let go. That only has to happen to you once for you to forever lose your trust in the institution that was supposed to protect you. Third story is a story of consequences. And this is something that, to me, is just one of the most profoundly shocking but also paradoxical elements of this research. The levels of discrimination, gender-based, class-based, ethnicity-based, cultural, age-based, especially in the advertising industry. I mean, if you're a bit older, if you have caring responsibilities, you're all of a sudden not a real colleague anymore. Being bullied at work, somebody yelling at you publicly, toxic environments, bro cultures in the newsroom. If you can't stand the pressure, you don't belong in journalism, is something that our interns often hear from senior reporters. Up and to including transgressive behavior and all kinds of misconduct, sexism. Now, I mean, all of that is, the percentage of that experienced by journalists or media professionals in general are much higher than the general population, and of course especially by those in already marginalized positions, people of color, women, young people in particular. And why this is of course horrible, and we're all in agreement that that shouldn't happen, but what is even more concerning is that, I don't know about you, but all the media professionals I've ever met in my life, and I used to be one myself, are the least likely people to be a bunch of sexist, racist pigs. In fact, most people who work in the media are fairly cosmopolitan, enlightened, progressive thinking, well-educated, because otherwise you can't get in. So how do these people become such monsters? That's because the culture of work is sickening. This is not how normal people interact, yelling and screaming at each other, exploding because somebody used the wrong font for a slide. Right? That's not normal behavior. That is I would say, I'm not a psychologist, but I would say that's a stress or a trauma response. That is a response to something that isn't right. Another story that can be told is, so where do media professionals point the finger to in terms of who should be fixing this? And it's consistently across all these reports and all this data and all these interviews, it's leadership, management, and not the top, but the people directly above you. Because as anybody who's ever had a mental health problem can attest to, or some of you or people who know who've been therapists or coaches can tell you, it's one thing to realize that you're struggling with your health related to work, but it's even worse if you feel unsafe expressing that feeling. If you can't go anywhere because for fear of stigma, of retaliation, of taboo, of being singled out, or being left out. I mean, we all know that so much of the work in all these industries is precarious work, right? Temporary contracts, short-term contracts, freelance. Well, if you're a freelancer and you say, hey, sometimes the work stresses me out, you can't say that because you might be passed over for the next gig, the next assignment, the next client. So fear, taboo, and stigma amplify the problems that are already there. And so leadership, if you have a manager or leader that can't hear you when you want to talk about sometimes struggling at work, your complaints, your situation actually gets progressively worse. And finally, the data tells a story of love, of I can't believe I'm getting to do this. I mean, two images that the top one is a Dutch one. I won't expect you to read that as much as I can't read Finnish, but I love the language. The two images are from two recent studies. On the left is a study among the Australian screen industry, and the right is a study among American journalists, and they both have exactly the same conclusion. That 3/4 of respondents in these studies say, I love what I do. I'm so grateful for turning my creativity into a career. And the same percentage says, this industry is shit. Excuse my language. It's a horrible place to work. I would not recommend it to my children. And you understand what an impossible position that is to hold at work, right? So what are the consequences of all of this? And I think it's important to draw a distinction among 4 types of consequences because, and they relate. So let me briefly touch upon the consequence. The first one is mental problems, mental issues. And with mental, I mean anything that relates to, like I already said, heightened levels of stress, fear, burnout, depressive symptoms. And look, we all want our news media to be able to provide an answer to the challenges of this world, to the climate crisis, to geopolitical mayhem, to the rise of tech companies that seem to be in control of everything, to covering what's going on in our countries and of just around the border, in Ukraine, in Gaza, and everything like that. And for that, our news organizations need to be nimble and flexible and creative and innovative and all of that. Now, how much creativity and innovation can you expect from people that are scared for their livelihoods, for their families, for their future, that feel unsafe to speak up or speak out? They won't do it. Any expert in innovation can tell you, you can only innovate if people buy into your vision. Now, people who are scared and stressed and depressed won't buy into anything. So if you don't fix that, then all of our plans about what to do with AI you can just throw them away, which is a consistent trope in media innovation research, right? Why don't innovation projects never really seem to work? Well, because you didn't take care of your human beings. So mental issues. Emotional issues, then we get to what I just described as discrimination, bro cultures, machismo, misconduct, transgressive behavior. That is all emotionally corrupt or disrupted behavior. That is people that have no emotion regulation because they're in a constant state of trauma. Physical problems are, well, let's consider the industry's drinking culture. One of the interviews I did was with the chairperson of the Behind the Scenes Foundation. It's an American organization that helps crew members in film and television across the country. And she told me the story that I wanted to share with you, which is the most popular service that her organization provides to the tens of thousands of colleagues that they represent is, this is not a joke, it's real, It's a tutorial on how to go to after parties and rap parties, in other words, after office drinks, without drinking alcohol. Because you're expected to. But if you are detoxing, or because you're a caregiver, or just because you want to lay low, or you don't want to drink, well, you can't be seen with water or a Coke, right? You're not being taken seriously. You are a threat to everybody else who's getting shit-faced. So what do is you show up early, you find a friendly bartender, and you get a glass of soda, and you get like a little umbrella and ice cubes and everything. And then during the night, you have this deal with this bartender that he or she will refill your drink without anybody watching. So it looks that you're drinking vodka all the time. We laugh, but it's scary as hell to think where this behavior comes from. Right? The industry's drinking culture, bad sleeping habits, bad eating habits, and several research projects in Australia and the UK, among others in Spain, have shown that the rates of suicide among creative professionals are 4 times higher than the average population. So this is a very real physical consequence of the work. Oh, and finally, spiritual. Now, that doesn't mean religious or something like that. But I do think it's important for us to acknowledge that the reasons why people want to be journalists, generally speaking, have little or nothing to do with earning a good, decent salary so you can afford a mortgage or getting famous. Maybe some students want to do that, bless them. But generally speaking, people want to become journalists or filmmakers or actors or game developers because they love the news or games or telling amazing stories, telling your own story. That is, there's a deep passion involved with that. Like I said earlier, right? It's what this data tells us. But what if that passion ends up betraying you? What if you invest everything you've got, day and night, into this job, and after 5 years or 10 years or 5 months or 3 days, it doesn't matter, some editor, some director, some organization says, yeah, we don't need you anymore. Good luck. And it's just like, wait a minute. I've done everything right. I've given my heart and soul to this thing, and I've run up to a blind wall. This happens to almost everybody in these industries. And what that results in is an intense, profound feeling of disenchantment and disillusionment. In other words, it's a spiritual consequence of what the work does to people. Like the other day, I was at a Dutch film festival to talk about this, and one of the directors in the audience afterwards stood up and told me, Mark, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and now I'm in recovery. And that story I've heard so many times. How is that okay about work that matters, which journalism clearly does? Now, I want to end with 2 comments. One is to explain why this situation is the way it is, and then, of course, if I have time, and I depend on Laura to tell me when I don't anymore, I run overtime all the time. That's wonderful. 5 minutes, oh, easy. Let me tell you about that time that I was, how did it get this far? Is this a matter of professionals digging their own grave? Because we all love journalism and being a journalist, right? And surely that means that this job, this profession attracts people that will do anything it takes and thereby, setting themselves up to fail. Maybe, but that's not what the data says. That's not what the evidence suggests. There's something else going on. I didn't know what that was. As a simple media scholar, I'm not a trained psychologist or therapist. I'm not even trained in management and business. I'm just a media scholar and a former journalist. What did I know? I entered my field of work because I love what I'm doing. So how could I really still see what might be the problem? So I turned to a friend, Karen Nieuwenhuizen. She's a doctor at our University Medical Center in Amsterdam. And she and her team study, fairly simply, what about work makes people sick? It's not what about work makes people stressed, but actually sick, like with a medical diagnosis, like a doctor telling you, go home, right? Don't work anymore, because if you keep doing this, you'll die. It's a pretty robust model. And they identified 3 aspects of work that, taken together, explain 70 to 90% of people getting sick at work. So that's an incredibly powerful model. And she was telling me about this, and she sent me some of her publications, and I was reading their work, and I was like, but this is the definition of how media companies are managed. But for her, it's a model of what makes people sick. And I had the same response. I was both laughing, like, yeah, I've experienced all of that. Between you and me, this is also how universities work. And yes, I've seen too many young talents at the university burning out halfway through their PhD or postdoc, once they realized how this institute actually works. It's an amazing institute. I love it. It's noble. It's essential in society. But the way it treats its people, no. Not okay, not healthy. And I'm co-responsible, right? So I just want to acknowledge that. But okay, so her model is for me the definition of what happens in the media and what makes people sick, what causes the data to show the kind of patterns that I've just shared with you. And so I took her variables and applied them to my research of newsrooms around the world, of agencies and studios around the world, of film sets and production houses around the world, of music organizations and record labels and bands around the world. And I consistently found the same pattern everywhere. What about working in the media, pursuing creative career makes people sick, are a combination of 3 things. Now, you don't read everything, because, you know what, I won't show it because you're gonna read anyway, because you're bad students. I remember all of you. No. But the 3 variables are fairly simple, and they're also fairly simple to remedy, actually. This is also what Karen and her team are working on. First one is a lack of reciprocity between what people bring to the work and what the work gives back. And you can kind of sense that. I just told you the story of, when you're a journalist, you're giving it all you've got. You love what you're doing. The work is noble. It means something. It is a cornerstone of democracy. Absolutely. Does the industry treat you like that? No, it doesn't. It offers poor working conditions, bad contracts or no contracts at all. Freelancing is on the rise around the world. There's nothing wrong with freelancing. Most freelancers want to be freelancers because they don't want to work permanently in the newsroom anymore, in part because the newsroom sucks. And we kind of accept that. So there's a lack of reciprocity between what people bring to the work, all that passion, all that love, and what the work gives back. The second variable is low organizational justice. Organizational justice is whether you know or feel that the decisions that are made about you and your colleagues are just, are fair, are based on transparent principles, that people who make decisions, editors, directors, people in charge, leaders, management, are accountable for their decisions. Hell no, that doesn't happen anywhere in the media. These people get cool gigs and big jobs because, what? They're somebody's son or daughter, or you fancy them, or they're a friend from school. Right? My favorite story about this is, you all know "Just Do It," right? The slogan of Nike. Now, who came up with that slogan? It's a guy called Dan Wieden. Dan Wieden is the head of an advertising agency out of Portland, Oregon, called Wieden & Kennedy. I'm guessing none of us have heard of them. How did Wieden & Kennedy from Portland, Oregon, get the Nike account? Because Dan Wieden sat next to Phil Knight, the CEO of Nike, in high school. They're buddies. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Of course not. But is Dan Wieden the best advertising creative man in the world? No, of course not. He's lovely. But it's in a nutshell an example of a much broader issue of low organizational justice. Whether you get the job, get the gig, get the contract, get the assignment, is that based on how good you are? Is that based on a transparent procedure? Is that something that you can hold people accountable for? Never. And that makes people sick. The third variable is extreme workloads. Now, don't confuse this with, I can't handle constant deadlines or something, because actually that's something that both motivates and frustrates people in the media, and especially in journalism. That's not it. It's when the workload doesn't let up. There's nothing to balance it out. Right? You keep on going, there's no clear reward, you're only as good as the last thing you've ever done, and it's not non-stop, and then we add the digital to the mix, and AI to the mix, and declining business models to the mix, and it's never ending. There's no balance, there's no amelioration. Lack of reciprocity, low organizational justice, and excessive workloads together explain 70 to 90% of people getting sick at work in general. And to me, those three elements are at the core of how all media companies are managed. And so the data that I've just told you about should not be a surprise. It actually is a surprise that it isn't much, much worse. And the only reason it isn't much worse is because we love what we do. Now, to conclude, I'm going to skip a couple of things. I'm not showing you anything more after this. To conclude, I want to conclude with a word about love. And, lack of reciprocity, low organizational justice, workloads, they're easy to fix. Fair contracts, good collective organization, joining unions, collective agreements, standing up for each other, empathic leadership, professionalization of management. I mean, these are things that any organization that has a heart can implement fairly quickly and don't necessarily cost extra money. So that is not really the real challenge. For me, the real challenge is this labor of love thing. The fact that we're so passionate about what we're doing when we are a journalist, when we are professors like Laura and I am, and Marco. In the literature that I showed you, this emerging literature on all of this, generally speaking, this passion is considered to be our problem. Right? Because we love what we do so much, it sets us up to fail. If you love what you do, you'll accept anything. Oh, you're going to cut my salary in half? Ah, that's fine. Oh, you're not going to pay me for all the hours I put into this investigative piece, but only for the word count? Oh, that's okay. I love digging into this story. It's an important story. Everybody should know. Right? I love what I'm doing, so my love becomes my Achilles heel. What if that analysis is wrong? Because I don't know about you, and I ask you to look inside your own heart, but that love isn't your weakness. In fact, it's your strength. What do people do who fall in love? I'm hoping you are in love, like I am at the moment, but when you're not and you have a friend who's really in love, or they just are in love, what do? Stuff they never ever would do when they would really think about it. And we all have this friend who is like, packing their bags, and it's like, what are you doing? I'm moving to the United States, because that's where she lives. And it's like, maybe first date, or like go to the movies, or like no, it's the love of my life. Don't stop me. And off they go, right? God bless them. Beautiful. The point is that their weakness? Or is there something else going on? And something else is that the love makes them do something they would normally never do. Love, in other words, isn't a feeling, it's a transformative force. And what if we turn that love not just into something that we invest in our stories, but in our industry? Now, maybe this sounds naive, but it really isn't. The research I'm doing at the moment with my PhD students looks at the strange phenomena that media professionals around the world are the least likely to join unions, but the most likely to protest. Collective organization around the world in media organizations is exploding. Small groups of journalists all of a sudden deciding to walk out, or to occupy the newsroom, or to demand a meeting with the editors-in-chief. We call this affective organizing because it's organizing based on an intense feeling that something just isn't right. It's, in other words, based on love. But also individually, if you do what you love, even though you're not getting paid fairly, even though your editor treats you like garbage, even though the audience bullies you online, isn't that what you do the most life-affirming act possible? Isn't that a big, and I apologize, I'm going to say something explicit, a big fuck you against capitalism and against commerce and market-driven, no, I'm doing something because I love. That's the work we should be protecting and celebrating in the society that we live in today. And finally, love as a transformative force, as acknowledging that everybody loves what they do in journalism. It's not just the people trying to get in, it's not just the people who are desperately hanging on, and it's also not just the people in charge, it's all of us. That's what we have in common. And remember that friend that was just about to leave for the United States? Well, that gives us strength and power too, to genuinely change something. It doesn't require a completely new industry, it requires an industry that acknowledges that it loves what it does, and that love has a dark side, that the moment we normalize the conversation about love, we can have the journalism we all desire. Thank you so much for letting me speak today, and hope to see you soon.